it's just like a war. You know, you had an enemy in place. You deployed forces against his forces and his existing tactics. He then modifies his tactics, tries new methods of doing business. You, in turn, have to react to that. We will always be in this action-reaction mode, trying to stay on top of him. In the beginning, what did he do? He laid low. Nothing moved. Everything dropped throughout the United States. Prices fluctuated like mad. Then, when he saw that we weren't going to come down here for a winter's vacation and go back to Washington, he decided he had to test the system. So now you see the end run attempts. And still, I'm sure, trying to make penetrations of the system. And that's going to go on and on and on.
Captain, I do not desire to injure any people. I do not understand why you object to us boarding if you are an innocent vessel. We simply desire to check your documents and verify that you are not conducting any illegal activity. Do you understand?
Yes, I understand. Stole my jeep, but not to kill the people.
Captain, I do not desire to injure anyone on your vessel. That is the last thing I want to do. However, we are over 2 days from Columbia. I will stop you. I will stop you.
I'll tell you what I'll do. I'm going to take a 3-week tour starting off at Taos.
For what?
Ski. I like John.
No,
better.
sorry.
John, you never ski. You'll love it.
I know most people.
I'm telling you.
Do you
You
really?
don't know anybody that's
I know nobody.
I know. See?
I'll call you tomorrow morning.
It's everything you ever thought to be
Where are you
anywhere.
going?
You like Telluride,
Okay.
remember?
I know.
Didn't you tell me that?
I know.
Well, no, I haven't skied there either. And we're going to do it too. We're going to go from there to Telluride.
You know why you like Taos?
Going to use all of our resources to stop the flow of drugs. And we are, for the first time, through the South Florida Task Force that the Vice President heads, that the President set up, turning the screws. We now know that what kind of resources we have, how we can utilize those resources, and we will put a full court press on. The President has made it very clear that he considers drugs as one of the gravest problems facing us internally.
Get the arm back and open that up. That's the other way back there.
We are going to see much, much better coordination. We're going to see much better enforcement. And if I were a drug dealer or a drug smuggler or a major trafficker, I would be thinking seriously about switching my operations to Europe, because the Americans are going to make it so bloody hot, he's going to have to find a cool place.
You got your small little pen light? Let me see it. Yeah, that's all it is. It's like an oil pan.
A few of these are some of our significant seizures that we're really proud of. This one here in the middle is the largest cocaine seizure in the history of the United States that was made by our team back in March. It was almost 4,000 pounds. It was 3,906 pounds of cocaine that had arrived from Colombia in cargo. Some of the other seizures as far as significance, we get cargo as far as transmissions, automobile parts coming in for repairs. We've gotten cocaine inside the transmissions, which is extremely difficult to work because it takes about an hour to dismantle this transmission before we can verify if there's narcotics in them.
Are there any other seizures you'd like to talk about, Mark?
Yes, sir. I don't know if you can see it here too well, but what it was 19 cartons of bird feeders. Inside the 19 boxes were 799 of these little bird feeders. And then each side of one of these bird feeders there was approximately 80 grams of cocaine concealed inside these. Again, we did not have any prior information, but when we drilled them, we produced the cocaine on our drill bits, and it was quite a job to conceal that much cocaine, a total of 185 pounds, inside 799 of these little bird feeders. Can't, of course, get to every aircraft that are arriving and work the cargo. The offloaders, the employees for numerous airlines, they know the markings, they know which boxes will have the cocaine in them. As they're breaking down the cargo, when they spot the ones that they're informed of, they'll just steal the boxes out of the warehouse, or it'll never arrive to the warehouse from the aircraft. I've been with Customs now 11 years, and the volume of cocaine coming in has really risen. It's causing numerous murders and drug wars going on here in South Florida because the market is here, and Miami has been referred to as the cocaine capital of the world. And as a native Miamian, I have to agree with it. I've never seen so much cocaine entering our country since I've been with Customs.
What we have come to call the body packer syndrome occur in individuals who go to South America and they will purchase a quantity of high-grade cocaine, perhaps 90% pure. They will then package this either in condoms or in balloons into fairly small packets, about half the size of a hen's egg, and will swallow these. Upon swallowing them, they embark upon a plane bound for the United States. And once they have passed through customs, we'll then go to a hotel room, and by using a variety of enemas and laxatives and so forth, we'll try to excrete these and retrieve the condoms with the cocaine. And hence they'll be able to have successfully smuggled the drug into the United States. The problem with it is that the condoms are, in fact, permeable to water. Water can't seep through. And cocaine is very soluble in water, so therefore the cocaine leaks out and the individual may absorb large quantities of cocaine. When this happens, we have the body packer syndrome, and it's usually an individual who has signs and symptoms of cocaine toxicity, such as dilated eyes, nervousness, sweating, anxiety, and the like, anywhere between the time he's aboard the plane to the time he's in the customs area of the airport, or perhaps he's found dead in his hotel room. When we perform autopsies on these people, we invariably find anywhere from 1 or 2 fairly large packets of cocaine inserted into one body orifice or another, or perhaps up to 100 or more condoms or balloons filled with cocaine, of which several may have ruptured.
You have an enemy, you know where he's located, you know where he's trying to get through. You deploy your forces to meet him based on the tactics that he's using at the time you deploy him. If he has any guts, he'll come through and try and fight. These guys don't. They're trying to either lay low or go around, so they don't engage in battle. They change their tactics, and you're going to have to react to their changing tactics, and it's very similar to a war. We just can't get to engage them as much as I would like. You know, the Caribbean could be the Mediterranean in the middle of a war.
Captain, during the night, I have received authorization from the government of Colombia to fire into your vessel to stop you if necessary. Do you understand?
Yes, I understand, Captain. I understand.
Captain, if you do not stop your vessel within the next hour, I will take action with gunfire to stop your vessel.
The civilian and military forces of the United States are indeed awesome. And our task and our challenge is to focus their efforts and properly coordinate and channel that awesome might to address the problem. We haven't done it completely. As in any human undertaking, there's always room for improvement, and we're learning as we go along. And keep in mind, the use of the military is like 9 months old, or our capability to use it for this purpose is very, very recent, and we're really charting uncharted waters here. But I think, in the abstract as you cast it, our might to deal with that problem is greater than theirs. Our task is that we have certain constraints that the dopers don't have. They're not worried about their own budgets. They're not paying taxes on their profits. They have no constituency to serve but themselves. We're constrained by the rule of law and by the rule of reason men in attacking a sort of problem, and they're not. Their enforcement tactic is very effective. They kill people with machine guns.
Fishing vessel Kone, this is Coast Guard 629. Captain, I have given you 1 hour to stop your vessel. You have chosen not to stop your vessel. At this time, I am warning you that I am commencing the fire.
Hey, 160.
Got smoke. Woo! All right! See ya. Whoa.
Interdiction is important, something we should attend to, but it's not going to be successful if we allow the production to increase the levels where it seems to be going at the present time. We believe that the primary obligation, as far as the illicit traffic of cocaine is concerned, rests upon the countries where it's produced and through which it's trafficked. This is an obligation they assumed under the Single Convention, which covers the production of cocaine, heroin, and marijuana.
I would say that we have no substance in the English-speaking world, indeed in the entire Western world, which is as universally applicable as coca is in Bolivia. They use coca as a medicinal substance. We found that it could be used medicinally in over 40 ways. It could be combined with as many as 39 different other medicinal herbs. It can be used to heal wounds. It can be used most of all for stomach ailments. It can be used for headaches. It can be used for arthritis. And it can be used to treat what I would call psychosomatic disease. That is, illnesses that are attributed to Andean spirits that are very real to these people and that can bring illness which is so severe it can bring death. In that case, coke is one of the few things that one can offer to placate the spirits so that one is restored to health.
If the Indians are using coca leaf for chewing in the traditional sense, that's not what we're aiming at. We're aiming at the production of coca that comes into the market as cocaine. And that, we believe, is not a traditional use that the Indians have made of the coca leaf. This is a relatively new innovation. This is a profit-making motive, and the profits are largely going to outsiders.
Bueno, señor, lo único que nosotros podríamos indicarle que la coca para nosotros es todo. La coca para nosotros, en cuanto a la importancia, la coca es nuestros zapatos, la coca es nuestro pantalón, nuestra camisa, nuestro sombrero. La coca es la educación de nuestra familia, la salud de nosotros y de nuestra familia. ¿No? En cuanto a la importancia, eso podría decirle, señor.
You'd scoop down in a helicopter, you'd find a small Indian family there. They'd have a little lean-to where they were living. One family was, you know, a man, 2 women, a couple of children, dog, a horse, chickens. And then off about, I'd say, 100 yards away from where they're living, they'd have this little labs that I was talking about. And that's what was burned down. At no time did anybody burn the little residence that they had there. I tried to interview the Indians that were doing it, and of course they pretended they didn't know much about it. They didn't own the fields. Some guy in Bogota owned the fields. They didn't know they were doing anything illegal. They weren't getting any money. They were, you know, in the city you'd call them street smart, and I guess you'd call them jungle smart down there, because they gave us no information that would be of use in trying to convict anybody.
The prohibition of coca, of growing coca, was already attempted in the 16th century by the Viceroy of Peru. And it was a failure then, and there have been many attempts since then to eradicate coca, and it's never worked. And I doubt it ever will, without measures that are so disruptive and so unpopular that we would cause a great deal of misery in these areas that are dependent on coca growing and always have been. It's very unfair to blame the so-called cocaine problem in the United States on the Andean peasants who have been growing coca for more than 5,000 years. For the U.S. government to go to Peru or Bolivia and physically destroy coca plantations, to burn them, to cut them down, to defoliate them, is a ridiculous policy. And it's very hard for people to swallow down there because, first of all, we don't have a very good image in many Latin American countries, which has been a problem over the years. And this is seen as a direct act of aggression, of imperialism, fostered by the United States. And in many cases, it is imposed upon these South American governments more or less by a kind of economic blackmail.
We're saying eradication of the illicitly produced, not the licit, with a full realization that there is legal chewing of coca leaves in Bolivia and Peru, and I answered that question very cautiously. We're not out for the licit, but the illicit. They also export the leaves for flavoring agents and soft drinks and cocaine. We realize that. But there is a document called the Single Convention on Narcotic Substances of 1961, which is binding upon all countries that signed that international agreement to control those narcotic plants being produced in their country. They have an obligation.
I've had many conversations with people in the U.S. Mission, in the narcotics control offices in Bolivia, in the DEA, and I've always argued that what is needed above all is respect for traditional Bolivian culture and respect for Bolivian society and Bolivian customs. And I've always been guaranteed that there would be this respect, so that the official government position, and this is the position I would hope really would be adhered to, the official government position is that crops will be reduced only to the point that is needed so that there is enough coca to supply the traditional market. This, unfortunately, is not happening. What is happening is that the coca leaves that are disappearing tend to be the coca leaves that are going into the traditional market, and there are still plenty of coca leaves to go into cocaine production because, of course, the price is so much higher for the coca leaves going into cocaine production. Knowing Bolivian past history, I am skeptical that this can ever be controlled because nothing has ever been controlled in Bolivia. And because of this, I'm very apprehensive that instead of eradicating coca, what we may end up doing is engaging in genocide of a very proud and very worthy cultural tradition. Unfortunately, many people are now turning to alcohol instead of coca, and there I see a very real danger, particularly since the alcohol that is used by peasants in Bolivia is distilled alcohol that comes out of sugarcane refineries, and it is the strongest alcoholic beverage ever analyzed by the Center for Alcohol Studies. It is 89% pure ethyl alcohol. It's like as if one were to take sudden death.
In the coca leaf from which cocaine is derived, we find about 0.5% to 1.5% cocaine. In the long-term studies of the coca chewers in the Andes Mountains in Peru and Bolivia, these studies that have been going on since 1926, there have been no indications of any dysfunction to their lives or to their health. And indeed, there's evidence that it's very functional and very healthy, and there's a nutritional complement in the coca leaf that comes along with the cocaine. But when we concentrate down that cocaine and remove it from the leaf's protective envelope, we concentrate down all of the effects and we concentrate down all the problems. And all the problems that we see with cocaine use in our society today are a result of dosage problems.
You did the whole thing?
I know.
You do a whole line. Excuse me, and also the deaf and dumb actually start coming in. Deaf mutes definitely start coming in. After you are with deaf mutes, start coming in. Yeah, and everything's fine. So no, I was just asking. She listened through the whole thing. I thought.
In the older days, it was a drug of deviants, of black musicians, of bohemians. And yet, on the other hand, it's the drug of very wealthy, successful people, entertainment figures that people look up to. So I think there's a double image to it. It's racy and illicit and fast and very much a status thing. I've heard somebody say that in parts of California today that you just have to have a box of white powder on you. I don't suppose many people even know what it is, but just that you offer white powder to people to snuff is a great sign of economic status. You know, it really is a way of if you're in a room and somebody passes cocaine to you, lines of cocaine, it's an interesting economic gesture. You know, it's like saying, "Here's $20, stick it in your nose." No, I can give you that money.
His defense, no, but they said the book was kind of his defense money and whatever. If he told one lie, that it would be nullified.
I like that one.
How about the guy that went to the bar for a night?
I did make that point that they went to them. They cut that in. The other point I made that they didn't get in there, which should have been made if we had more time, that what the government does is a demonstration project.
Yes.
If the government is violent, people are violent.
Yes.
See, the government is supposed to stand for a symbol of what is best. And if they engage in violence, then it becomes a model, it becomes possible.
Who got assassinated?
It would increase violence.
In this society, probably all over the world actually, there is such a desire to classify some things as good and others as bad. And that goes on to the extent that the drugs we've accepted and encouraged the use of, we often don't even see as drugs or see them from what they are. No drug that I know of compares with alcohol in terms of physical toxicity, either short-term or long-term, psychological toxicity. You know, it's the only drug that clearly causes crime and violence, and it causes a lot of it. An enormous number of accidents, murders, all sorts of violent crimes are committed under the influence of alcohol. And yet, look at that. I mean, that's everywhere here. You fly on airlines in this country, and if something goes wrong, if the flight's delayed or they don't have the right meal for you, they give you free liquor. That's the way they buy you off. You don't even see it for what it is. Tobacco in the form of cigarettes is the most addicting drug known. There's no drug that compares with cigarettes in addictiveness in terms of how fast the addiction forms and how high a percentage of users are addicted. I mean, it's very rare to find non-addicted cigarette smokers. They're around, but there aren't very many of them. And also in terms of how hard that addiction is to break.
The problem is not one of rationality. We are engaged in a very real sense in a public morality play in which the forces of good are pitted against the forces of evil, and the forces of evil are represented by drugs and drug dealers. It's an old phenomenon in American society. We used to have demon rum before Prohibition. After Prohibition was repealed, the Federal Bureau of Narcotics created a new one under the slogan Reefer Madness to dramatize the alleged dangers of marijuana smoking. In the 1970s and the 1980s, we seem to have come to cocaine as the devil's dust. And again, it's this idea that the substance is so destructive and so evil that the will of the individual will be completely overcome as a result of taking the drug, and he or she will no longer be a full human being.
At the turn of the century, you could go into a bar and ask the bartender to put some cocaine in your whiskey, and he would. In fact, in a sense, the most popular use of cocaine was its use in the drink Coca-Cola in this country. And in fact, I believe it was because of this that the American drugstores used to have the soda fountain where people would sit down and order things. And I think that was a situation where people could come in and for 5 cents get what was referred to as a shot in the arm, which was a glass of Coca-Cola. And people who suffered from headaches, who had various kinds of gastric distress, or were feeling fatigued or somewhat depressed, would come in, get a Coca-Cola, and truly they would feel better.
I feel that the laws should be in touch with the pharmacological reality of what we know about drugs. For example, cocaine is classified as a narcotic drug. This is because of an historical accident. Coca and cocaine products were legal and over-the-counter in the United States, as they were in much of the rest of the Western world in the 19th century, in the latter part of the 19th century. Because largely of a yellow racist journalistic campaign in the United States, cocaine became associated with crime and violence. There were banner headlines that appeared in such prestigious medical journals as the Journal of the American Medical Association and the New York Times, which proclaimed that the rape of the white women in the South is due to the cocaine-crazed Negro brain. And without any evidentiary hearings presented before Congress on the scientific nature of cocaine, Congress passed the Harrison Act in 1914, which proscribed the use of heroin, opium, coca, and cocaine. And because it was called the Narcotics Act, all the drugs listed in it became known as narcotics, even though cocaine is not a narcotic. It doesn't cause a narcosis. It doesn't cause a stupor. It's not a derivative of the opium poppy. It doesn't sedate the electrical activity in the brain or quiet behavior. It comes from a different part of the world, a different plant. It has an opposite effect in the central nervous system and stimulates behavior.
What we have done in our country is we have defined narcotic in many different ways. And we usually refer to the generic term that's used on the street as a narcotic produces, it has pain-relieving quality or an analgesic, and it produces physical dependence. Under that classification, obviously, cocaine is not a narcotic.
So why is it, if it is not a narcotic, that people have to go to prison for possessing it?
It is illegal in our society, and it will stay that way. It is a drug of abuse. And debating whether or not it's a narcotic is ridiculous.
I think that drug abuse is a very, very difficult term to define, but I think probably as good a way as any is to consider that it is any use of the drug which is harmful to the individual and or society. Now, by that definition, there obviously can be use of cocaine, which is not abuse. There also can be abuse.
The bicarbonate is the cleaner. It's the active ingredient that will take all the cut or all the what we call this, the step that's been put on it. The cuts reduce the purity. And by using the bicarbonate, we're going to get the most pure cocaine back that we can. Freebasing is more of a body high than it is a head high. When you toot, the whole rush tends to go right to your head, whereas my feelings about freebasing is take a hit off of a freebase pipe and you feel it all the way down to your socks. I mean, it's a tingling that just kind of goes right down your body. There it goes. It's starting to melt there. As it's starting to melt, now you're ready to hit the pipe. It's starting to fizzle. And this is the end product. This is what all the work is for.
very nice. I don't know how anybody could complain.
Most of the people in the United States that we feel that we have sufficiently surveyed and sampled are using cocaine. They're not abusing it. The most dangerous aspect of their use, and one that should concern their health, is the fact that they are engaged in a criminal activity. And they have to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous criminal penalties for their use, which would be far more detrimental to their health and welfare than anything that cocaine will produce.
The use of cocaine and the distribution of cocaine is prohibited by federal law and by the law of every single one of the states, by all 50 states. So the very, very strong public policy of this government, of the people of this government, is that the use and distribution of cocaine is a serious crime. Having said that, every public policy is worth talking about, debating, discussing, so that you arrive at the best solution to all of these problems. At this point in American history, I don't see any trend in favor of considering relaxing the laws as against cocaine.
In general terms, of course, I have a problem with the notion of prohibitions. I'm not absolutely persuaded that that's the best way to do it. I mean, during the Volstead Act in this country, it's true, people drank less alcohol, there was less cirrhosis, and so forth and so on. But indeed, the price we paid socially was enormous in terms of our freedom, in terms of really many people think that the mafia got its foothold during the Prohibition years.
1 in every 4 murders now is believed drug-related. Some of them the efficient work of a gang the police call the Cocaine Cowboys. The deaths have different looks, different places, and foreign names, but most trace back to a roll of money and a white powder, cocaine, that sells on the street for $70 to $100 a gram.
As far as guns are concerned, they all have guns, they all carry guns, automatic pistols, 14-shot clip, firepower, heavy firepower.
Now this mostly Latin, loosely organized band of drug smugglers is becoming what police are calling a slowly emerging Latin mafia, complete with territories of influence and a terribly swift and final form of justice by execution.
I do coke with like a lot of police, undercover agents, lawyers, big shots. I mean, big people with a lot of clout. And I've been assured by a few people that if I ever got into trouble, I'd be taken care of. And the people I've been guaranteed protection from, or I guess the profession is protection. These are, I don't know if you want to call it a name, would be the syndicate. I have several friends in the syndicate. And they're very well connected politically. They said, if you ever have any problems, just come to us. They can take care of anything.
One of the paradoxes of drug law enforcement is that the very act of enforcing the law, the criminalization, is the very thing that makes it profitable and that ensures its survival. I think it's obvious that this $30 billion a year business could exist only under a condition in which the drug is illegal and therefore worth so much more than its $1.70 per gram price. The stakes are so much higher with cocaine than with other drugs. Whereas a pound of marijuana will sell for approximately $400, a pound of cocaine will sell for $30,000. So the incentives to kill, to rob, are very, very high.
The police are well aware of what's going on. They can play dummy all they want. They know all the shooting gallery spots. They're scared to go in there because most of the dealers, they're all heavily armed and they have big shootouts. And they just go, as long as you don't upset the apple cart, they won't bother you. But if they come over to you and they tell you they know what's going on in a roundabout way, give them the respect of shutting down for a day or two, and you could operate another month. If you don't show them the respect, they call their flying squad. They come in on you with bulletproof vests, heavy artillery, and 9 out of 10 times somebody gets hurt, a drug dealer, and I mean bad, because they got to teach a lesson every once in a while. But other than that, they know where all the hot spots are in the city. They can't do nothing about it shutting it down because there's too many of them. But like I said, they keep it limited. Where as long as nobody's getting stabbed or shot in the places, they let them go on. They're pretty decent about that, and most of them are on graft anyway. The man that deals, you never know who he is, and they go by names, like they call their package. Some of them call him Swingin' Sue, the bitch. That's all individual names, and each person has a copyright on them.
What happens if people don't pay up?
That's what you call a head story. You go for the head to kill the body. They got one chance. I call it one-shot credit. Whatever their fix is, they could trust me for that. If their fix is $50, I give them that $50 trust. If they don't pay it, not only will they not cop off me again, they can't even come in my territory. Plus, I'd give them a little going-away present, like a little broken leg or a broken arm, whatever it costs for that, and get my $50 or $100 they owe me, whatever it was. There was no such thing as give me a break. I'm not a forgiving person.
Drug dealers operate because the law prohibits the cocaine and therefore makes it valuable on the black market. So they will sell cocaine and generate enormous profits, billions per year according to the government. At the same time, the government will be recycling some of those funds back to the United States Treasury and the budgets of the local police departments by seizing the money from the drug dealers that they are able to catch and convict. And so you will have a system of mutual interdependence that will sustain itself like a perpetual motion machine. In effect, drug agents will be making money for the governments that employ them. I think at that point, there will be not a single voice raised in protest.
Everything we've done in this society for almost 100 years now is to ensure that the growth of drug abuse. And it amazes me that we still do it. You know, you try certain methods of dealing with the problem, that is punishing users, trying to stop use, trying to scare people away from drugs, and all that happens is more people use worse drugs in worse ways, and then what do? You do it more. You keep doing it over and over again. And you look at what's going on now with the present administration, it's the same old stuff. The more we attempt to have wars on drugs or fight them, the worse they'll be. We have many more people using many more drugs in many worse ways and forms than we did before we had drug laws.
Put it all in.
Okay, wait a minute. Okay.
No te apures. All the way in and to come out. Great.
¿Cómo estás?
I'll tell you in a few minutes.
Okay. Please, will I take care of my shit right now, okay? Toma. Usa esto.
It's coming. Quémoslo en el fundillo, el quinine.
I don't want to get too fucked up. My wife's gonna beat me up.
Bien. Take your time.
All right, then. Perico está good. Cocaine is on, too.
We better take it a little more suave, right?
It is very rare to see an intranasal compulsive user. It is very common to see an intravenous or a freebasing, that is someone who's smoking cocaine, compulsive user. And we're talking about less than 1% of the 15 million people who are using cocaine in the United States who fall into this category of compulsive use. And not everybody in that category has problems that demand clinical attention. The good news is that when they do have problems and they're detoxified, the problems go away. You have to really work at cocaine to have a problem.
The important thing that I realized towards the end of my drug-taking career was the fact that I was totally out of control and that my life was a total mess. And I can always remember fantasizing sometime in my life I would like to live without the use of any mind-altering chemicals, but I could just never quite figure out how to do that.
Individual in recovery is in a crossfire between a society that stigmatizes it because they're an addict, and the using group that says you're not cool unless you continue to use. And so they have to find a third place where there's recovery and people support recovery. And that's one of the difficulties about public attitudes, is they try to convey that once you use, you immediately become an addict, which is not true. And once you're an addict, you're always an addict, which is not true. And so there's a lot of public misinformation about cocaine, addiction, recovery. And there's also a lot of peer pressures to keep using. It's very hard to avoid social situations where people are using cocaine. And then you feel very badly about yourself. And that's something that a person that decides to not continue to use and get into recovery has to deal with, this stigmatization from both their peer group, who wants them to continue to use, and the dominant culture that wants to put them in jail.
We have an enormous problem that is budding, and I think that problem is budding because past administrations took the idea that don't worry about it, it's so expensive it will not become a problem. Now it is a problem. We must address that problem. We're going to address it with the enforcement efforts, we're going to address it with the eradication efforts, and we're going to address it with education prevention efforts inside our society, because it is something a highly industrialized world cannot tolerate.
You're not going to cure substance abuse or addiction by supply reduction. And the current policy is basically a criminal policy aimed at supply reduction. For any policy to be effective, it has to focus on reduction of demand by that group that's having the problem, which would involve education, prevention, such as family education, talking openly about it within the family framework. If you do have addictive disease in your family, if you have one parent that's alcoholic, you have a 35 times higher chance of your child developing alcoholism or some other form of addictive disease. If you have two, it's 400 times higher probability. Addiction is a disease, and you wouldn't put somebody in jail because they have diabetes. Why put somebody in jail because they have the addictive disease of the cocaine type, alcohol type, or any type?
We are facing a crime. We are facing an insidious occupation that can undermine our society, and that it would be very helpful to our efforts if they'd stop smoking and sniffing the stuff. And then wouldn't be any need to be spending all this money and expending all this effort trying to stop the stuff from coming into our country or into your country.
The problem is not the drug. The problem is not cocaine. The problem is, why is it so popular? And it's not just pharmacologically that it rewards the brain. It's that there's an underlying basic human motivation to stimulate oneself, to use these plant alkaloids. Our species, and indeed other species, have always medicated themselves with plant alkaloids and plant drugs.
I have
consistently been struck among the Cubeos and other Amazonian tribes of the utter lack of curiosity among children about coca. Every hut has a can of coca. The kids are there all the time, and they don't use it. And I've asked kids in these cultures, aren't you curious about what coca does? No. Don't you want to try it? No. Why? Why don't you want to try it? Well, I'll do it when I grow up. I mean, that's a totally different attitude than you find up here. They don't regulate drug-taking behavior through law. Nobody says there that you're going to go to jail, a kid is going to go to jail if he tries coca. It's not prohibited. It's just social custom that's communicated naturally in families. Frankly, I'm not convinced that we can do so much to cure drug abuse or treat it once it's there. I think that the emphasis, and I as a medical doctor, I feel this way about illness in general. I think that prevention is what counts, that money and energy goes much further in preventing problems than in curing them once they've developed. I think it is very realistic to try to prevent drug abuse in the first place, and I think that education is the key to that.
We will use all bilateral and all multilateral agreements at our disposal, all banking laws, any method we can to reduce the supply coming into our country. If it's not eradication, it's going to be interdiction. We have made the decision. The President said we're taking down the white flag. It's flown over so many drug issues, we're running up the battle flag.
If you read the speeches of the President of the United States or of the politicians who have recently coalesced for bigger drug enforcement budgets, it becomes clear that there is simply no demand for a rational alternative. There's no need for a rational alternative. And quite the contrary, one could argue that there is a need for this psychodrama of a struggle between good and evil, in which the drug and the drug dealers assume the properties of the devil. And can be warred against, although of course it's a war without an end, without a victory, without a victor.
Bring it home or what?
Yeah, let's just take it.
I'll buy a sec to stand for it. I'll come back to you in 3.
Okay.
Take the Mike 173.
Mike 173, center.
Be advised, we're going to bring that boat into Pop 100 for a search, closer search.